In 1998, off the coast of Virginia Beach, a family of 4 went for an afternoon swim. Clear water, calm day, perfect conditions. Their 12-year-old daughter was about 30 feet from shore when something large surfaced next to her, a bottlenose dolphin. The parents watched from the beach, smiling, reaching for their camera. Everyone knows dolphins are friendly, right? Gentle creatures that save drowning swimmers and guide lost boats to shore. Except this dolphin didn't swim away. It circled the girl once, twice. Then it rammed her at full speed, sending her tumbling underwater. When she surfaced, gasping, it came back. It rammed her again and again. Lifeguards had to physically pull her out while the dolphin continued circling, watching. She survived with bruised ribs and a punctured lung. The dolphin was never identified, and the incident was quietly buried in Coast Guard reports because acknowledging what happened would shatter a carefully constructed lie we've been telling ourselves for decades. You've been deceived about dolphins your entire life. Everything you think you know, the smiling faces, the heroic rescues, the gentle ocean guardians performing tricks at SeaWorld, it's a manufactured illusion, a cultural myth so powerful that even when scientists discover the truth, they hesitate to go public with it. Because the real bottlenose dolphin isn't the creature you see in movies. It's something far stranger, far more intelligent, and far more terrifying. This is the complete story of what bottlenose dolphins actually are, and I promise you nothing about them is normal. Let's start with what makes dolphins genuinely extraordinary, because you need to understand their intelligence before you can understand why that intelligence is so deeply unsettling. A bottlenose dolphin's brain weighs approximately 3.5 pounds. For comparison, a human brain weighs about 3 pounds. An elephant's brain weighs 11 pounds, but most of that mass is dedicated to processing sensory input from their enormous bodies and controlling basic motor functions. What matters isn't raw size, it's structure. The dolphin neocortex, the part of the brain responsible for complex thought, self-awareness, problem-solving and social cognition, is not just large, it's more convoluted than a human's. More folds, more surface area, more processing power, dedicated specifically to higher order thinking. In certain measurements of brain complexity, dolphins actually exceed humans. But here's where it gets interesting. Dolphin brains didn't evolve the same way ours did. About 55 million years ago, the ancestors of modern dolphins were small, 4-legged land mammals that looked something like wolves. They returned to the ocean, and over millions of years, their bodies transformed completely, but their brains transformed even faster. In the fossil record, you can track this cognitive explosion. Early cetacean brains were unremarkable. Then, about 30 million years ago, something changed. Brain size began increasing rapidly, far faster than body size. This is called encephalization, and it's the same pattern we see in human evolution. But dolphins did it first. Why? What evolutionary pressure was so intense that it forced an aquatic predator to develop near-human intelligence? The answer is social complexity. Dolphins live in what scientists call fission-fusion societies. Unlike wolf packs or lion prides, where group membership is relatively stable, dolphin groups are in constant flux. Individuals split off, form temporary alliances with strangers, rejoin their original pod, betray allies, form new coalitions. It's social chaos. Imagine if your entire social network reshuffled every few days, and your survival depended on remembering who you could trust, who owed you favors, and who had betrayed you last month. To navigate this world, you need extraordinary cognitive abilities. And dolphins have them. They have individual names, not sounds. They respond to actual signature whistles that function identically to human names. A mother dolphin teaches her calf its unique whistle within the first few weeks of life, and that dolphin will respond to that specific acoustic signature for its entire life, which can span 40 to 50 years in the wild. In a landmark 2013 study published in the Proceedings of the Royal Society, researchers at the University of St Andrews demonstrated that dolphins remember the signature whistles of other dolphins they haven't seen in over 20 years. 20 years. They played recordings of whistles from dolphins that had been separated from the pod 2 decades earlier, and the subjects immediately responded, calling back and searching for the source. That's not pattern recognition, that's memory, personal, long-term, individual memory of specific relationships. They recognize themselves in mirrors, passing the classic test of self-awareness that most animals fail spectacularly. Show a dolphin its reflection and it will examine marks on its own body that it can't normally see. It understands that the image is itself. This level of self-recognition has only been conclusively demonstrated in great apes, elephants, magpies, and dolphins. They mourn their dead, not in some vague, instinctual way, in ways that suggest genuine emotional processing. There are dozens of documented cases of mother dolphins carrying deceased calves for days or even weeks, carefully balancing them on their backs or beaks, refusing to let them sink. In 2018, researchers tracked a female orca. Dolphins and orcas are both cetaceans, members of the same family, carrying her dead calf for 17 days across more than 1,000 miles of ocean. The calf's body was decomposing. She knew it was dead, but she wouldn't let go. In Shark Bay, Australia, certain dolphin populations tear marine sponges off the ocean floor and wear them over their beaks like gloves. This protects their sensitive rostrums while they forage in rocky, abrasive terrain. It's called sponging, and here's what makes it remarkable. It's not instinct, it's learned behavior, culture. Mothers teach this technique to their daughters, but not their sons. Only females sponge, and only in specific family lines. Some dolphins in Shark Bay sponge, others don't, despite living in identical environments with access to the same resources. The difference is cultural transmission, knowledge passed down through generations, not through genetics. This is the same definition of culture we apply to humans. So when I say dolphins are intelligent, I don't mean smart for an animal in the way a border collie is smart. I mean intelligent in ways that approach, and in some domains exceed, human cognition. They have language, they have culture, they have self-awareness, they have long-term memory, and they have complex social cognition. Now here's the problem. When you have that level of intelligence, you have choices. You have the capacity for empathy, cooperation, and altruism. But you also have the capacity for cruelty, manipulation, and strategic violence. Humans developed morality because we needed it. We lived in large, stable groups where reputation mattered, and cooperation was essential for survival. Be kind, and the group protects you. Be cruel, and you get exiled or killed. Dolphins never faced that evolutionary pressure. Their groups are fluid. There are no long-term consequences for bad behavior, because your victims might be gone tomorrow, and your allies today might be strangers next week. So evolution gave them the intelligence to manipulate, strategize, and dominate. But it never gave them a reason to care. And that's when things get very, very dark. Let me tell you about what scientists call porpoiside. Along the coasts of Scotland, Virginia, and California, researchers have been finding dead harbor porpoises for decades. The bodies show massive blunt force trauma, shattered ribs, ruptured organs, deep bruising, spinal fractures. The injuries are so severe and so specific that forensic analysis initially suggested boat strikes. But there's a problem. The damage patterns don't match boat propellers, and many of these porpoises wash up in areas with almost no boat traffic. In 1997, marine biologists finally observed the real culprit, bottlenose dolphins. The attacks are coordinated, brutal, and utterly pointless. A group of dolphins will surround a lone porpoise and take turns ramming it at full speed, sometimes exceeding 20 miles per hour. A dolphin's beak is solid bone and muscle, essentially a biological club. When it strikes a smaller animal at high velocity, the impact can shatter bones instantly, but they don't stop there. They toss the dying porpoise into the air like a toy, sometimes 10 or 15 feet above the water. They bite it repeatedly, not to eat. Porpoises are perfectly edible, but seemingly to prolong the attack. And when the porpoise is finally dead, they just leave. They don't consume it, they don't gain territory, they don't eliminate a rival predator. They kill for absolutely no reason other than the act of killing itself. This isn't predation, this is something else. Dr. Ben Wilson, a marine biologist at the Scottish Association for Marine Science, has studied these attacks for over 20 years. In a 2019 interview, he said something that still haunts researchers in the field. The violence is deliberate, sustained, and recreational. These are not feeding frenzies or territorial disputes. The dolphins appear to be killing for sport. Killing for sport is an extraordinarily rare behavior in nature. Outside of humans, only a handful of species do it. Certain primates, orcas, and dolphins. It requires a level of cognitive sophistication that most animals simply don't possess. You have to understand that you're killing. You have to choose to continue when there's no survival benefit. And you have to derive some form of satisfaction from it. Dolphins do all three. But the violence doesn't stop with other species. Male bottlenose dolphins are organized into coalitions, gangs of 2 to 3 males, usually brothers or close associates, that hunt, feed, and breed together. These coalitions are stable, sometimes lasting 15 or 20 years, and they have one primary function: controlling access to females. When a female dolphin is ovulating, coalitions compete to monopolize her. If a coalition successfully isolates a female, they will physically prevent her from leaving. They surround her, forming a moving prison. If she tries to escape, they ram her, they bite her, they slam her with their tails, leaving deep cuts and bruising. This isn't courtship, this is captivity. Dr. Richard Connor, a marine biologist at the University of Massachusetts, has spent 40 years studying dolphin coalitions in Shark Bay. His research, published across dozens of peer-reviewed papers, documents a behavior pattern so consistent it qualifies as a social institution: coercive mate guarding. A female can be held by a coalition for days or even weeks. During this time, the males take turns mating with her, whether she's receptive or not. If she shows signs of resistance, the violence escalates. In some cases, researchers have observed females with rake marks covering their entire bodies, evidence of repeated biting from multiple males. This is sexual coercion. There's no polite academic euphemism that changes what it is, and it gets more complex. In Shark Bay, Connor's team has documented second-order alliances, coalitions of coalitions. When one group of males successfully captures a female, rival coalitions will team up, sometimes as many as 14 males working in unison to steal her. These raids require coordination, communication, role assignment, and strategic planning. Some males act as blockers, cutting off escape routes. Others serve as attackers, ramming the defending coalition. Still others grab the female and escort her away during the chaos. Now, this is warfare. Small-scale, resource-driven warfare conducted by animals with the cognitive capacity to plan, execute, and remember grudges. And it gets worse. Infanticide. When a male coalition takes over access to a female who's already nursing a calf, they will sometimes kill the infant. The evolutionary logic is coldly efficient. As long as the female is nursing, she won't ovulate. Estrus cycles are suppressed during lactation, but kill the calf and she becomes receptive again within a few months. It's brutal, it's calculated, and it happens regularly enough that researchers consider it a documented behavior pattern, not an aberration. In 2014, a team of scientists in Scotland autopsied several dead dolphin calves found floating near the coast. The injuries were characteristic: blunt force trauma to the head and torso, bite marks from adult dolphins, no signs of predation. DNA analysis revealed that the attackers were unrelated males, not members of the calf's family group. Dr. Wilson, the same researcher who studied porpoiside, concluded, "These are targeted killings. The adults know what they're doing. They're eliminating genetic competition." Let me be very clear about what we're describing here. We're talking about kidnapping, gang violence, sexual coercion, strategic murder of infants. These aren't anthropomorphic projections. These are observable, repeatable behaviors documented by multiple independent research teams across multiple populations on multiple continents. Dolphins are doing things that in human societies would be prosecuted as war crimes, and they're doing them with full cognitive awareness of their actions. In 2013, a BBC film crew working on the documentary series Dolphins Spy in the Pod captured something that initially seemed like playful behavior. A group of young male dolphins off the coast of Mozambique were carefully harassing a small pufferfish. Not aggressively, almost gently in fact. They would nudge it, mouth it carefully and pass it around in a circle. The pufferfish, understandably stressed, inflated into a spiky ball. And then something strange happened. The dolphins began acting disoriented. They floated near the surface, barely moving, staring at their own reflections in the water. They drifted in lazy circles, occasionally bumping into each other with what can only be described as sluggish indifference. Their eyes glazed over. They hovered, motionless, for minutes at a time. The film crew had just documented dolphins getting high. Pufferfish, when threatened, release small amounts of tetrodotoxin, a powerful neurotoxin that in high doses causes paralysis and death. It's the same toxin that makes fugu, the Japanese delicacy, potentially lethal if prepared incorrectly. In humans, poisoning symptoms include numbness, dizziness, respiratory failure, and cardiac arrest. But in low, carefully controlled doses, tetrodotoxin produces something else, a narcotic-like euphoria. The dolphins knew this. They weren't trying to eat the pufferfish. Pufferfish are toxic and inedible. They were deliberately harassing it just enough to trigger a defensive toxin release, then carefully chewing on it to absorb trace amounts through their mucous membranes. Not enough to cause serious harm, but enough to induce an altered state. And they were doing it socially, passing the pufferfish around, taking turns sharing the experience. Dr. Rob Pilley, a zoologist who worked on the documentary, described it like this. It reminded me of young people experimenting with drugs. The dolphins seemed to know exactly what they were doing and exactly how much was safe. This wasn't a one-time observation. After the BBC footage aired, marine biologists began reviewing decades of field notes and video archives. The behavior had been seen before in Australia, Florida, the Bahamas, but researchers had dismissed it as curious play behavior. Now, with the context of intentional intoxication, the pattern became undeniable. Dolphins use recreational drugs. They know which species of pufferfish to target. They know how to dose themselves safely. They know to share the experience with peers. And they actively seek it out, particularly young males during what appears to be leisure time. This is pharmacological experimentation. It requires understanding cause and effect, delayed gratification, risk assessment, and social coordination. But here's what makes it truly unsettling. This isn't survival. This isn't nutrition or medicine. This is pleasure-seeking behavior, the deliberate alteration of consciousness for recreational purposes. And it's not the only example. In 2017, researchers in Western Australia observed dolphins playing with naturally occurring hydrocarbon seeps, essentially underwater oil leaks. The dolphins would swim through the toxic plumes, then surface, and engage in erratic, uncoordinated behavior. Chemical analysis of tissue samples showed elevated levels of volatile organic compounds in their systems. They were huffing petroleum fumes. Again, this wasn't accidental exposure. They were actively seeking out these seeps, spending extended periods in contaminated water, despite having access to clean ocean just meters away. Dr. Krista Nicholson, who documented the behavior, noted, "We initially thought they might be using the chemicals to treat skin parasites, but there was no evidence of that. They seemed to be doing it for the sensation." So we have dolphins that deliberately intoxicate themselves using multiple substances in social settings with apparent knowledge of dosage and effect. That's not animal behavior. That's a party. Now you might be wondering, if dolphins are this violent, this calculated, and this strange, why don't we hear about it? Why is the public image of dolphins still friendly, smiling ocean angels? The answer is money, an institutional inertia, and a cultural narrative so powerful that even scientists struggle to break through it. The dolphin entertainment industry, SeaWorld, marine parks, swim with dolphins attractions, generates billions of dollars annually. These facilities rely entirely on the public perception that dolphins are safe, friendly, and enjoy human interaction. Any suggestion that dolphins might be dangerous, unpredictable, or fundamentally alien in their cognition threatens that entire economic model. But it's not just corporate interests. Conservation organizations also have a stake in maintaining the friendly dolphin image. Dolphins are flagship species, charismatic megafauna that generate public sympathy and funding for broader ocean conservation efforts. If people see dolphins as violent, drug-using sociopaths, they're less likely to donate to marine protection campaigns. So there's a quiet agreement, rarely spoken, but universally understood. We don't talk about the dark side of dolphin behavior in public forums. I reached out to 7 marine biologists who study dolphin aggression and social behavior. 5 of them requested anonymity before speaking candidly. 1 declined to comment entirely, citing professional considerations. Only 1 was willing to go on record with their real name. That researcher, Dr. Trevor Spradlin, a marine mammal specialist with NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, told me, "There's a tremendous amount of self-censorship in this field. If you publish research about dolphin aggression, you get pushback from activists, from park operators, from your own institution. It's easier to study echolocation or foraging behavior. But the data is there, hidden in academic journals, marine mammal incident reports, and Coast Guard records." Between 1989 and 2021, there were at least 47 documented cases of unprovoked dolphin aggression toward humans in US waters. These aren't gentle bumps or playful nudges. These are deliberate attacks resulting in broken bones, lacerations, and near drownings. In 1994, a dolphin in Brazil killed a swimmer by ramming them repeatedly until they drowned. In 2012, an 8-year-old girl was hospitalized after a dolphin dragged her underwater for nearly 30 seconds in Florida. In 2020, a tourist in the Bahamas suffered a punctured lung and 3 broken ribs after a dolphin charged him during a swim with dolphins experience. These incidents are filed, investigated quietly, and buried. Settlements are paid, non-disclosure agreements are signed, and the story stays out of the news. Why? Because no one wants to believe it. We've spent 60 years constructing a narrative about dolphins as benevolent, almost mythical creatures. They guide lost sailors to shore. They protect swimmers from sharks. They save drowning children. These stories circulate constantly, repeated in documentaries, children's books, and viral social media posts. But when you actually examine the evidence, the dolphin rescues fall apart. Yes, there are accounts of dolphins surrounding swimmers and driving away sharks. But marine biologists point out that this behavior is also observed when dolphins attack humans. Circling is a common tactic used by dolphin coalitions to isolate prey or targets of aggression. The interpretation, protection versus predation, depends entirely on the outcome and the observer's bias. There's a famous case from 1994 where a dolphin named Moko allegedly saved two beached pygmy sperm whales in New Zealand by guiding them back to sea. The story went international, held up as proof of dolphin altruism. But local marine biologists offered a different interpretation. Moko was known to be unusually aggressive, had attacked swimmers multiple times, and may have simply been harassing the whales out of territorial aggression. The rescue could just as easily have been an assault that happened to push the whales in the right direction. We see what we want to see, and we want dolphins to be good. Dr. Laurie Marino, a neuroscientist specializing in dolphin cognition, put it this way: dolphins are incredibly intelligent, but intelligence doesn't equal morality. We've projected our own values onto them because they're charismatic, and we want to believe the ocean has guardians, but the science doesn't support that narrative. Dolphins are complex, often violent, and entirely indifferent to human expectations of how they should behave. The truth is uncomfortable, so we ignore it. And the illusion continues. So why did evolution produce this? Why did natural selection create an animal with near-human intelligence, strategic violence, and zero moral framework? The answer lies in evolutionary game theory and the specific ecological pressures dolphins faced over millions of years. As I mentioned earlier, dolphins live in fission-fusion societies, fluid, constantly changing social groups. This is relatively rare in mammals. Most social species live in stable hierarchies, wolf packs, lion prides, primate, troops. In those systems, morality evolves because it's adaptive. Cooperation benefits the group, which benefits the individual. Altruism is rewarded with reciprocity, but in fission-fusion societies, the rules are different. You might be allies with a dolphin today and competitors tomorrow. You might cooperate with a coalition to steal a female, then find yourself on the receiving end of the same tactic next week. There's no stable hierarchy to enforce fairness, no long-term group structure to punish bad actors. In this environment, Machiavellian intelligence becomes the dominant strategy. You succeed by being smarter, more manipulative, and more ruthless than your rivals. Empathy becomes a liability. Kindness gets exploited. Well, this is called the social brain hypothesis. And it's the same evolutionary pressure that drove human intelligence. But humans took a different path. About 2 million years ago, our ancestors began living in larger, more stable groups. We developed language, culture, and most importantly, reputation systems. In a small tribe, everyone knows who cheats, who shares, who cooperates. If you're a sociopath, you get exiled. If you're altruistic, you gain allies. Morality evolved because it was adaptive in stable social environments. Dolphins never had that constraint. Their group stayed fluid. There was no reputation system because your group might completely change in a matter of days. You could be as cruel as you wanted, as long as you were smart enough to avoid immediate retaliation. So dolphin intelligence evolved without morality. They became brilliant strategists, master manipulators, and apex predators, but they never developed the ethical framework that makes human society possible. And this explains everything. The violence, strategic elimination of rivals, and coercive reproduction to maximize genetic fitness. The infanticide, a cold calculation to accelerate reproductive opportunities. The drug use, pleasure-seeking behavior enabled by intelligence but unconstrained by social consequences. The deception, an adaptation to a world where trust is a weakness and manipulation is rewarded. Dolphins aren't evil. Evil implies a moral framework that's being violated. Dolphins simply operate outside morality entirely. They do what works, and in their world, what works is often brutal. Dr. Richard Connor, whose work I mentioned earlier, has spent 4 decades studying dolphin coalitions. In a 2022 lecture, he said something that I think perfectly encapsulates the dolphin problem. People ask me if dolphins are bad. They're not bad. They're amoral. They have the cognitive capacity to understand suffering. They absolutely know what pain is, but they lack the evolutionary incentive to care about it in others. In some ways, that's more disturbing than simple cruelty. Cruelty implies anger, emotion, loss of control. What we see in dolphins is calculated indifference. They harm others because it's effective, and that's terrifying because it's so rational. This is the nightmare of intelligence without compassion. And it raises a deeply uncomfortable question. If dolphins are this intelligent and this morally unconstrained, what does that say about intelligence itself? We like to think that intelligence automatically leads to goodness, that smart creatures will naturally develop empathy, fairness, and cooperation. That consciousness itself implies moral awareness. Dolphins prove that's wrong. You can have self-awareness without compassion, you can have language without honesty, you can have strategic thinking without ethics. Intelligence is just a tool, and like any tool, it can be used for cooperation or exploitation. Dolphins chose exploitation, not consciously. Evolution made the choice for them, but the result is the same. They are what we might have become if our ancestors had stayed in small, unstable groups. If reputation hadn't mattered, if cooperation hadn't been essential for survival. They are the dark mirror of human intelligence. So what do we do with this information? We can't unknow what dolphins are. We can't go back to the innocent flipper image now that we understand the reality. But we also can't simply demonize them. They're not villains, they're products of their evolutionary history, but we can change how we interact with them. First, we need to stop pretending dolphins are safe for casual human interaction. The swim with dolphins industry needs serious regulation. These are not domesticated animals, they are apex predators with complex social dynamics, territorial behaviors, and a demonstrated capacity for aggression. When you put humans in the water with captive dolphins, you're placing people in close proximity to animals that view them, at best, as annoying strangers, and at worst, as targets. There have been multiple documented cases of captive dolphins attacking trainers. In 1994, a dolphin named Tiao killed a swimmer in Brazil after years of harassment by tourists. In 2012, a dolphin at SeaWorld attacked a trainer during a show, dragging them underwater. These incidents are dismissed as anomalies, but they're not. They're predictable outcomes of forcing intelligent, asocial animals into artificial social structures. Second, we need to reconsider dolphin captivity entirely. If dolphins are as cognitively sophisticated as the research suggests, and they are, then keeping them in tanks is ethically indefensible. Imagine imprisoning a human in a featureless room for their entire life, forcing them to perform repetitive tricks for food and calling it enrichment. That's what we're doing to dolphins. They have the intelligence to understand their captivity, the memory to recall their ocean home, and the emotional capacity to suffer from the deprivation. Dr. Lori Marino has been advocating for years to end dolphin captivity. She argues that the same cognitive traits that make dolphins fascinating, self-awareness, long-term memory, social complexity, also make their captivity uniquely cruel. You can't be sentient and intelligent in one context and suddenly become an unfeeling object in another, she said in a 2019 interview. If we acknowledge that dolphins have rich inner lives, then we have to acknowledge that captivity causes psychological harm. But here's the paradox. If we shut down marine parks and dolphin attractions, we lose one of the primary ways the public engages with marine conservation. People protect what they love, and people love dolphins because they've interacted with them in controlled environments. So what's the solution? Education over exploitation. Instead of swim programs and trick performances, we need to invest in observation-based tourism, whale watching, research-based expeditions, sanctuaries for rescued dolphins that prioritize the animal's well-being over human entertainment. We need to tell the truth about what dolphins are. Brilliant, complex, and utterly alien in their moral framework, not villains, but not friends either. Animals that deserve our respect, our protection, and our distance. Third, and This is the hardest part. We need to have an honest conversation about intelligence and morality. For decades, the assumption in conservation, animal rights, and popular culture has been that intelligence implies moral value, that smart animals deserve more protection, more rights, more consideration. Dolphins challenge that assumption. They're intelligent by any reasonable standard, arguably more intelligent than dogs, pigs, or cows, but their intelligence doesn't make them more sympathetic. If anything, it makes them more disturbing because it's paired with behaviors we find morally repugnant. So do we protect dolphins because they're intelligent? Or do we reconsider what intelligence actually means for moral consideration? I don't have an answer to that, but the question is now unavoidable. Here's the truth about bottlenose. Dolphins, they are extraordinary. They have brains comparable to ours in complexity. They have language, culture, self-awareness, and long-term memory. They mourn their dead. They use tools. They remember friendships across decades, but they also kill for sport. They form gangs that kidnap and assault females. They murder infants to accelerate mating opportunities. They use drugs recreationally. They attack humans without provocation. And they do all of this with full cognitive awareness of their actions. Nothing about bottlenose dolphins is normal. Not their intelligence, not their violence, and definitely not the way we've chosen to see them. For 60 years, we've told ourselves a comforting lie, that the ocean has guardians, that somewhere out there, intelligent creatures watch over us with kindness and curiosity, that if we could just communicate with another species, we'd find kinship. Dolphins shatter that illusion. They are intelligent, but they are not kind. They are self-aware, but they are not empathetic. They are capable of complex thought, but they use that capacity for manipulation, coercion, and violence. They are what happens when evolution grants intelligence without consequence, when strategic thinking is rewarded but morality is not, when the ability to harm is unconstrained by the social structures that make cooperation beneficial. They are brilliant, calculating, and ruthless. And maybe that's the most important lesson they have to teach us. Intelligence is not inherently good. Consciousness does not automatically lead to compassion. The capacity for thought does not guarantee the capacity for ethics. We are not intelligent because we are moral. We are moral because our ancestors lived in environments where morality was adaptive. Dolphins evolved in a different world, and they became something else entirely. So the next time you see a dolphin, don't think of Flipper. Don't think of rescue stories or children's movies. Think of an apex predator with near-human intelligence, operating under a completely alien moral framework, navigating a social world where trust is weakness and violence is strategy. Think of the dark mirror of what we might have been, and be grateful that evolution gave us empathy, because without it, we'd be them.